We'll get started. Welcome, everyone. We have a special time today because, yeah, we have a special guest from Asia, from Korea, Ajin Cho, who'll present today. Ajin is a graduate student at Yonsei University, and Professor Hajun Song's group, who's also here. Ajin will present today on winds and current modeling experiments. Ajin, yeah, go ahead. You can share your screen. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, let me share my screen. Um, yeah, can you see it now?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay. Oh, sorry about that, because yeah, that's it. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm excited to be here to share our research. My name is Ajin again, and I'm a fourth year graduate student at Yonsei University, and these are my advisor and collaborators. Today, I'll be talking about how current wind interaction modify the intensity of tropical cyclones. To start, I'll briefly introduce key research from our previous work, and then I'll move on to the main topic of this talk. Yeah, first, I want to clarify what current wind interaction is. As many of you may know, air-sea interaction vary depending on the spatial scale. And at the mesoscale, roughly 10 to 100 kilometer, ocean variability can drive atmospheric variability. And this type of interaction is particularly strong in regions with mesoscale oceanic features, such as eddies and fronts. And one of the mechanisms is the interaction caused by ocean currents, which is known as current wind interaction. This refers to the process where surface currents modify wind stress, which then influence the wind field and the ocean again. If you look at the wind stress formula down here, yeah, here I use W as wind and U as the current. And yeah, when we look at this, um, if we change the wind speed to relative wind to relative to surface currents instead of the absolute wind, it alters wind stress, which subsequently modifies the low-level atmosphere and ocean currents. So previous studies have shown that this process can lead to a slowdown of the mean circulation and reduction in eddy kinetic energy. However, current wind interaction does not only mechanically affect the air-sea flux, because most air-sea fluxes of momentum, heat, and other properties are presented using Burke formulas, where near-surface wind speed is a key factor. This means that changes in air-sea fluxes due to surface currents should influence not only momentum flux, but also heat flux. So despite this, there is not much research about how relative wind affects turbulent heat flux. So in our previous work, uh, yeah, we investigated whether turbulent heat flux, like latent heat flux and sensible heat fluxes, also change under current wind interaction and what impacts that might have. To examine this, we conducted experiments to assess the effects of current wind interaction on wind stress, latent heat flux, and sensible heat flux. And these figures below show the changes in wind stress, turbulent heat flux, low-level wind speed, and temperature. The analysis region is the Western North Pacific, specifically the crucial currents region, a western boundary current with strong surface currents. In the right panel, I should represent the black control line with 0.3 meter per second surface current. So it shows the strong current region. And in the right panel again, we found the wind stress and turbulent heat flux increased or decreased by about 20%, 10 to 20% along regions with strong current region here. So as a result, we also observed changes in near surface wind and temperature. And these changes in inertia flux increase with surface current speed, and the response vary depending on the angle between the surface wind and wind vector and current vector. Yeah. The figure below categorize each model grid based on current speed and wind current angle, then show the average flux differences within each bin. So the left panel shows the difference in momentum flux, while the right panel shows the difference in turbulent heat flux. In both cases, the response is stronger when the surface current speed is high, and additionally, when the wind and current are nearly aligned in the upper part of the figure, like 0 to some degrees, the fluxes has been decreased because of the current-wind interaction. Whereas when they are in opposite directions in large angles, the flux increases, indicating that both vectors play a crucial role in determining RC exchange. Moreover, this modification of RC fluxes led to long-term changes in the cross-current region. The figure shows sea surface height in May and June after 5 months of model integration. And panel A represents the mean sea surface height, where we can see a sharp gradient of about 0.4 meter, indicating the presence of a strong geostrophic current there. And panels B to D show daily contours of the 0.4 meter SSH line in the same period. And in the different colors represent cases with different current wind interaction, either on wind stress or turbulent heat flux. And the variation in contour lines for each cases indicate that the regions of strong currents have shifted due to current wind interaction. So this confirms that both processes of current wind interaction can contribute to changes in oceanic conditions. These findings were recently published in Ocean Modeling. So following this, our next question was whether these two types of current wind interaction could also influence the atmosphere. So this made me think of tropical cyclones, because those two RC fluxes play crucial roles in the energy cycle of tropical cyclones. According to studies on tropical cyclones, turbulent enthalpy flux, same as turbulent heat flux, serve as the energy source that drives the storm, while wind stress acts as a drag of the tropical cyclone, playing a key role in energy sink. So you might have heard of the concept of potential intensity of tropical cyclones, which is a theoretical limit to the maximum intensity that can be achieved via TC. So the formula that determines potential intensity is essentially derived from the balance between energy generated and dissipation term driven by wind stress and the enthalpy flux. But however, I thought that the effects of ocean currents might be negligible due to extremely strong winds of tropical cyclones. So I looked into previous studies to see how strong the currents might under tropical cyclones. According to observational study using radars and scatterometer data, strong ageostrophic current are generated under a tropical cyclone, with the current speed on the right side circle about 2 to 4% of the wind speed. Here, the x-axis is wind speed and y-axis is ageostrophic current in the quadrant of the tropical cyclones. And for the direction in the direct differences in direction between the ageostrophic current and surface winds, it also has generally aligned in the right side circle of the tropical cyclone. So based on the results, we know that the currents on the right side of the tropical cyclone are aligned with the wind direction. Therefore, we hypothesize that current wind interaction could reduce both wind speed, wind stress, and turbulent heat flux. And this led me to wonder how the intensity of the tropical cyclone might change as a result. So thus, the goal of this study is to investigate how current wind interaction modify RC momentum flux and turbulent heat flux in tropical cyclones, and what impact it has on in TC intensity. Yeah, to answer this question, we used a coupled atmosphere ocean model called SCRIPS, which combines WRF and MIT GCM. Both models have a horizontal resolution of 0.1 degrees to simulate tropical cyclones and mesoscale oceanic features. And a time step for WRF is 30 seconds, and for MIT GCM is 180 seconds, and which is same as the coupling coefficient. So every 3 minutes, the atmosphere and ocean model exchange variables like surface forcings and SST and oceanic currents. So yeah, to examine the effects of dynamic and thermodynamic current wind interaction separately, we created 4 simulation cases. The control case is AW, which is from absolute wind, and there is no current wind interaction. And in the tau RW case, ocean current effect is included only in the wind stress, while the QRW case, the effect of ocean currents is included only in the turbulent heat flux. In the RW, both effects are included. So these 3 cases were compared to the control case to assess the impact of current wind interaction. Yeah, the target region was the Western North Pacific, and we selected typhoons that generally developed and dissipated within the model domain during the period from 2016 to 2018. So we simulated these typhoons over their active periods. To detect typhoons, we used sea level pressure, 10-meter wind speed, 850 hectopascal vorticity, and also temperature anomalies to check warm core and excluding extratropical cyclones. So here's the results. I will first show the output results from 5 typhoons. And yeah, this is the tracks of 5 typhoons with all 4 cases overlaid. Since spectral nudging was applied to the large-scale geopotential height, the tracks are generally similar for each typhoon case. So since the simulated typhoons follow similar tracks across the different cases, they experience comparable environmental conditions, such as sea surface temperature and atmospheric circulation, suggesting that any changes in typhoon intensity are due to current wind interaction rather than environmental factors. Furthermore, since the goal is to assess the effect of the current, the analysis was conducted only up until just before landfall, like yeah, here, like that. And yeah, in our previous work, we found that the changes in air-sea flux increase with strong currents and smaller wind current angle. Yeah, this is because the modification of air-sea flux is ultimately determined by the difference in magnitude between relative wind speed and absolute wind speed. Yeah, so I draw the ratio of those between those 2, relative wind and absolute wind. So and yeah, this figure shows when the wind speed of 45 meter per second, like the typhoon condition, yeah, how the ratio determines with the surface current speed and wind current angle. Yeah, as you may see, the ratio is being less than 1 in the blue color when the current speed is high and the angle is small, aligned with wind and current vector. So yeah, which reflects that. Before examining the responses in the simulated tropical cyclones, we will first review the surface current speed, wind current angle, and wind current relative wind absolute wind ratio, because it can represent the current wind interaction possibility. And this figure shows the surface current speed and the wind current angle along the tracks of the type 5 typhoons. The average surface current speeds are represented with contours and the wind current angle with shading, with red color, the aligned vectors. The patterns are aligned with the typhoon tracks. So with the y-axis oriented in the typhoon's moving direction. So for all 5 typhoons, we see the high current speed over 1 meter per second in the right side of the circle here, and wind current angle below 30 degrees on the right side of the circle too. So this indicates that in these typhoons, strong surface currents are generated under typhoon, generally aligning with surface winds, especially on the right side of the moving direction. We also examine the ratio between relative wind and absolute wind speed, as it can indicate the strength of surface current coupling. If the ratio is smaller than 1, the current wind interaction reduces air-sea flux, so leading to changes in the upper ocean and lower atmosphere. These figures show the ratio for each typhoon cases, with the blank histogram representing the ratio in the left-hand side circle, and the shaded histogram showing the right-hand side circle. And the location of 1 is in the center of each figure here. And grids in the typhoon's right-hand side circle have much smaller values than in the right-hand side, indicating stronger current wind interaction. Yeah, because it has far from 1. Therefore, we will focus on the changes in the right-hand side circle. Until now, I showed the surface currents under typhoons, and now I will show the changes in air-sea fluxes and the responses of typhoon intensity. This figure displays the mean wind stress difference on the TC's right-hand side circle between the simulation cases, such as tau RW minus AW, QRW minus AW, and RW minus AW. The lines represent the standard deviation, and in the first and third group, where current wind interaction is considered in wind stress, a decrease in wind stress compared to the control case is observed. Yeah, smaller tau wind stress than AW. Next, in the changes in turbulent heat flux, which is the sum of latent heat flux and sensible heat flux. Yeah, in the second group, where current wind interaction is considered in the turbulent heat flux, a decrease in turbulent heat flux is observed. And also in the third group, a decrease is also observed on average across 4 typhoons. The reason for the large standard deviation here will be discussed later. Anyway, in general, under the typhoon, current wind interaction directly reduces the air-sea flux. So this slide shows the responses of typhoon. This figure represents box plots of the minimum sea level pressure difference between the simulations, like here, like previous slide. And the first group mostly shows negative values, indicating stronger typhoons. And the second group shows the weaker typhoons intensity. And when both effects are considered in RW, the boxes are near zero line, indicating a compensating effect. However, the compensating effect does not imply that there is no change in RW. When we examine oceanic response, such as sea surface temperature, we can clearly see the difference. This figure shows the composite mean SST relative to the TC center at 0.0. The x-axis represents time, x-axis represents cross-track distance, meaning the right side corresponds to the right side of the typhoon, where the y-axis represents time relative to TC passage, and positive values on the y-axis indicate time after the typhoon has passed. And the contour lines indicate the mean SST in the control case, showing SST cooling after TC passage. Here, before TC, it has larger than 30 degrees Celsius or 29.5 degrees Celsius. But after TC, the contour has 29.5 or even 26.5. Yeah, and The shading represents the differences in SST between RW and AW, revealing warmer SST in RW after typhoon passage. It is because the RW experiences reduced wind stress compared to the AW case, so there's less upper ocean mixing occurs, leading to weaker SST cooling. This suggests that even though changes in TC intensity are minimal, the oceanic response remains significant. So this in turn leads to differences in seasonal simulations. Yeah, these figures show the tracks of typhoons generated from another simulations using the same coupled model settings for 12-month integrations, but without spectral nudging, and yeah, it has a longer period of integration. The shading represents daily SLP, sea level pressure contours, and the markers indicate the location of the minimum sea level pressure value. The legends show the start date of each detected typhoon. You can observe differences across the figures, not only the locations of the typhoons, but also the number of typhoons generated. This suggests that simulations on a seasonal scale or longer time scale how reveal the typhoon genesis and tracks vary across cases due to current wind interactions. Yeah, before moving on, let me give a quick recap of what we've talked about so far. In the right side semicircle of the TC, a strong current is temporarily generated, which is aligned with the wind, leading to a reduction in RC fluxes due to current wind interaction. The reduced wind stress, which is related to the TC's energy sink, contributes its intensification, while the reduced turbulent flux or enthalpy flux weakens the typhoon. However, there are some important points to note. These responses was not observed all the simulated typhoons. Yeah, let me show the right panel. It shows the typhoons that do not exhibit the responses of weakening in tau RW and strengthening in QRW when you compare to the left panel. Yeah, in other words, while some typhoons show the effects I mentioned earlier, like left panel, others do not. So I will now discuss why this happens. And this figure shows the surface currents and wind current angles for the typhoons that have unexpected responses. The average surface current speeds are represented in contours with contours and the wind current angle with shading in the contour case. The typical typhoons in the previous slide showed an average current speed of over 1 meter per second in the right rear quadrant, but for typhoons A, B, and E shows a smaller, weaker current speed there. It is around 0.8 meter per second or something. Additionally, in some cases, the wind current angle was not small enough for these cases. Before the five typhoons which show the expected responses, the average angle in the right side circle was mostly within 30 degrees. But for these typhoons, the angle between the wind and current vectors are around 40 to 50 degrees, meaning that the current wind interaction was less significant. And in these unusual typhoons, the ratio of relative wind and absolute wind speed in the right side circle is not sufficiently smaller than 1. For type, and yeah, when we see those things, we can see the uh, ratio is around 1 or 0.98 something. And when we see for typhoon B here, Malacas, many degrees in the left side circle here show the ratio greater than 1, which suggests when there's a decrease in RC flux in the right side circle, there could be offset effect in the left side circle. And for typhoon D, we are still looking into it and plan to analyze it further because it has yeah, small ratio in the right side circle, and left side circle has no larger than one. Anyway, additionally, the changes in typhoon intensity is due to RC flux modification could lead to further changes in RC flux and typhoon intensity. First, in response to wind, change in the typhoon intensity due to RC flux could result in low-level wind speed. This in turn could cause wind stress to increase in the opposite direction to the initial response, and turbulent heat flux could decrease even further. And when we consider the changes in SSD cooling, the modification in SSD cooling due to typhoon intensity change could uh, uh, could additionally impact typhoon's intensity by the change in latent heat release. So yeah, there is a complicated interaction with it. So this might explain the large standard deviation seen in the earlier RC flux difference figures. So in conclusion, as summarized earlier, the currents generated by the TC can reduce RC flux, which in turn can alter the TC intensity. However, when strong currents aligned with the wind do not form under the TC, it becomes difficult to detect such changes in TC intensity. Additionally, due to wind or SSD feedback processes, the RC flux or TC intensity could behave differently than described. Nevertheless, this study demonstrates that current-wind interaction can affect TC intensity, and in seasonal prediction systems or climate models, the number and tracks of typhoons may vary depending on the current-wind interaction. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ajin. Um, yeah, great talk. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions from the audience? While we wait for questions from the audience, I had one, Ajin, in terms of scales of motion, like when the tropical cyclones transition to extratropical cyclones, right? In in the tropics, the air sea interaction and the cooling under the tropical cyclones would, even if it's mesoscale, it would be at larger length scales. And as they transition into the mid latitudes, the mesoscales become smaller, right? While the scale of the extratropical cyclones are bigger, I guess.
Yeah.
So how do you see those scale interactions um, playing a role in the feedbacks that you mentioned? And like in our current weather models, I would think the tropical interactions are resolved to some extent because the scales, spatial scales are larger in the tropics. Whereas in the mid latitudes, since the spatial scales are smaller, the weather models don't resolve these. Right? Um,
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that because if I use the higher resolution, then um there might be strong typhoons because I didn't show the typhoon intensity compared to the observation, but since the yeah if yeah, it is still very weaker than the observation. So if we use higher resolution, then the typhoon would be intensified and the interaction would be greater or something.
okay, thanks. Sidong?
Yes, you didn't mention ocean waves, so I assume in your coupled model you didn't have ocean waves, surface waves.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because that is because of that, I plan to use wave model in this coupled model, and then yeah, analyze with the wave effect too.
Okay, so because you already plan to include the wave model, I just want to probably bring up that most of wave model is half coupled. Even though most people say their wave is coupled wave model, they're half coupled, in the sense that the surface wind momentum still drive directly the ocean current, which is incorrect. The correct way to couple the wave is the surface wind drive the waves, and the wave breaks, then the dissipated momentum that drives the ocean current. And using wave watch 3 is a historically biggest mistake our community has been made, studying atmosphere ocean wave interaction, because that model does not have the full coupling. That model only half coupling. So just be careful if you want to include any wave model, check whether that wave model is fully coupled or half partially coupled.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Thank you for advice.
Thanks, Jerome. Sarah?
Yeah, I have a basic question. You showed these plots of the response as a function of the angle between the wind and the currents. So the blue and red segments, and right at 0 degrees and right at 180, it was white, implying no response, or why is that?
You mean in this figure?
Yeah. So
I think this is
White is
because
one here.
white is 1. Okay.
white is 1 and things here and here. This is theoretical plot that I used just 45-meter wind speed in just zonal direction, and I made the count in, and maybe I used some because of the course count speed made that I used in the this figure maybe.
It's a really
I
interesting
could check
response
it.
pattern. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Are there other questions for Ajin? Maybe I'll ask one, Ajin. You showed these really interesting interactions in typhoons and tropical cyclones. Do you foresee other weather patterns that would have similar strong impacts from wind current interactions, such as like atmospheric rivers are one weather patterns which don't have as strong winds as tropical cyclones, but they do carry strong winds. And then, Arctic, for instance, like Arctic cyclones or other weather events.
I think the important property for current wind interaction is strong surface currents. So since typhoons has strong currents below the typhoons, it has current wind interaction. But if there's very weaker current speed, and then there's some weather phenomena with that, then there not be strong current wind interaction. So, but like in the previous study, when we see the current wind interaction in the active oceanic features like western boundary currents, and there might be some impact on it.
Okay. Don't see other questions at this time. So, yeah, last call for questions. If not, we'll wrap up the webinar today. Thank you, Ajin. Thank you again, Ajin.
Thank you for having
Great
me.
talk.
Yeah, thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Yeah.
See you all next time. Is it next Tuesday? So
Yes.